Murder on the Orient Express Part I. The Facts Chapter 1. An important passenger on the Taurus Express. It was 5 o'clock on a winter's morning in Syria. Alongside the platform at Aleppo stood the train which the railway guides grandly designated as the Taurus Express. It consisted of a dining car, 1 sleeping car, and 2 local coaches. By the step leading up into the sleeping car stood a young French lieutenant, resplendent in uniform, conversing with a small man muffled to the ears in wrappings. All that was visible of the stranger was a pink-tipped nose and the 2 points of a stiffly curled mustache. It was freezing cold, and this duty of seeing off a distinguished guest was not one be envied, but Lieutenant de Boss performed his part manfully. Elegant phrases flowed from his lips in polished French. Not that he truly understood what it was all about. There had been rumors, of course, as there always are in such cases. The general's temper, the general under whom the lieutenant served, had grown increasingly difficult of late. And then this Belgian had arrived, seemingly from England. A week of curious tension had followed. Then certain things had happened. A very distinguished officer had committed suicide. Another had suddenly resigned. Anxiety had vanished, and the general, de Bosque's chief, suddenly looked 10 years younger. De Bosque had overheard part of conversation between them. "You have saved us, mon ami," the general had said, his white mustache trembling with emotion. "You have saved the honor of the French army. You have averted much bloodshed. How can I thank you for acceding to my request, to have come so far?" To which the stranger, his name was Hercule Poirot, had made the appropriate reply. "But indeed, General, how could I forget that once you saved my life?" Then the general had replied with another fitting phrase, disclaiming any merit for that past action. And with more mentions of France, of Belgium, of glory and honor, they had embraced and the conversation had ended. As to what it had all been about, the lieutenant was still in the dark, but to him had been assigned the duty of seeing Poirot onto the Taurus Express, and he was carrying it out with all the zeal and enthusiasm befitting a young officer with a career before him. "Today is Sunday," said Lieutenant de Bosque. "Tomorrow evening, Monday, you will be in Istanbul." It was not the first time he had made this observation. Conversations on the platform before the departure of a train are often somewhat repetitive. "Precisely," agreed Poirot. "You intend to remain there for a few days, I believe?" "Mais oui. I have never been there. It would be a pity to pass through just like that." He snapped his fingers expressively. "I am in no hurry. I shall remain there as a tourist for a few days." "La Sainte Sophie, it is very fine," said the lieutenant, who had never seen it. A cold wind whistled down the platform. Both men shivered. Lieutenant de Bosque managed to steal a glance at his watch. 5 minutes to 5. Only 5 minutes more. Fearing the other had noticed his glance, he hastened back into speech. "Few people travel at this time of year," he said, looking up at the windows of the sleeping car. "That is so," Poirot agreed. "Let us hope you are not snowed up in the Taurus Mountains." "Does that happen?" "It has happened." "Yes, not this year, as yet." "Let us hope, then," said Poirot. "The weather reports from Europe, they are bad." "Very bad. Much snow in the Balkans. In Germany, too, I have heard." "Eh bien," said the lieutenant hastily, as another pause seemed imminent. "Tomorrow evening at 7:40, you will be in Constantinople." "Yes," said Poirot. He added desperately, "I have heard that Saint Sophie is very beautiful." "I believe it is quite magnificent." In one of the compartments, the blind was drawn up and a young woman looked out. Mary Debenham had had very little sleep since she left Baghdad the preceding Thursday. Neither on the train to Kirkuk, nor at the rest house in Mosul, nor on the train last night had she slept properly. Now, weary of lying awake in the hot, stuffy compartment, she got up and looked out. This must be Aleppo. Nothing to see, of course, just a long, poorly lit platform and the sound of furious altercations in Arabic. 2 men below her window were talking French. One was a French officer, The other was a small man with enormous mustaches. She smiled slightly. He was so heavily muffled up. It must be very cold outside. That explained why they kept the train so unbearably hot. She tried to push the window down lower, but it would not move. The conductor of the sleeping car approached the two men. "The train is about to depart, monsieur," he said. "You must get on board." The little man took off his hat. What a remarkably egg-shaped head he had. In spite of her preoccupations, Mary Debenham smiled. A ridiculous-looking little man. The kind of little man one could never take seriously. Lieutenant de Bosque was delivering his parting speech. He had thought out carefully and had saved it for the last. It was a very polished, elegant speech. Not to be outdone, Poirot replied in kind. "En voiture," said the conductor, with an air of great reluctance. Poirot climbed into the carriage. The conductor climbed in after him. Poirot waved his hand. The lieutenant gave a military salute. The train, with a terrific jerk, moved slowly forward. "Enfin," murmured Poirot. "BRRR," said Lieutenant de Bosque, realizing for the first time how cold he was. "Voila, monsieur," with a dramatic flourish. The conductor drew Poirot's attention to the luxury of the compartment and the meticulous arrangement of the luggage. "I have placed monsieur's smaller suitcase here." The conductor's outstretched hand was eloquent. Poirot slipped a folded banknote into it. "Merci, monsieur." The conductor immediately adopted a more businesslike tone. "I have monsieur's tickets. May I also have the passport? Monsieur is getting off at Istanbul. Is that correct? Are there many passengers at this time of year?" Poirot inquired. "Very few, monsieur. Besides yourself, there are only two others in this coach, both English, a colonel from India and a young English lady from Baghdad. Is there anything else monsieur requires?" Monsieur requested a small bottle of Perrier. To begin a journey at 5 o'clock in the morning is a challenge. There were still 2 hours to kill before dawn. Satisfied with the successful conclusion of his mission, Poirot curled up in a corner and fell asleep, though he suspected it would not be a long rest. He awoke at 9:30 and made his way to the dining car for coffee. There was only one other person there, the young Englishwoman the conductor had mentioned. She was tall, slim, and dark, perhaps 28 years of age. There was an air of efficiency about her. The way she ate her breakfast and the manner in which she summoned the waiter for more coffee showed she was an experienced traveler. She wore a dark, practical traveling suit of a thin material, well suited to the heated atmosphere of the train. Hercule Poirot, having nothing better to do, observed her discreetly. A cool-headed young woman, he decided, one who would never lose her presence of mind. He liked her poise and her businesslike manner. He also admired her severe, regular features and the curious transparency of her skin. He liked her raven black hair, arranged in perfect waves, and her gray eyes, cool, calm, and detached. And yet, he thought, she is not exactly pretty. She is perhaps a little too efficient for that. Presently, another passenger entered the car. He was a tall man, somewhere between 40 and 50, lean-tanned with slightly graying temples. The colonel from India, Poirot noted. The newcomer bowed to the girl. "Good morning, Miss Debenham." "Good morning, Colonel Arbuthnot." The colonel stood by her side, leaning his hand on the back of the chair opposite her. "Do you mind?" he asked. "Of course not. Do sit down." "You know," he remarked, "breakfast isn't much of a time for conversation." "Quite. But don't worry, I don't bite." The colonel sat down. "Boy," he called with authority, ordering eggs and coffee. His gaze rested on Hercule Poirot for a second, then passed on indifferently. Hercule Poirot, who knew the English well, read the colonel's mind. Just some damned foreigner. True to their national character, they spoke very little. After a few brief exchanges, the girl rose and returned to her compartment. At lunch, they sat at the same table again, and again ignored the third passenger. Their conversation was more animated now. Colonel Arbuthnot spoke of the Punjab and occasionally asked the girl about Baghdad, where, it appeared, she had been a governess. Finding they had mutual friends, they became less formal and more friendly. They discussed old Tommy, this and Jerry, that. The colonel inquired whether she was going straight through to England or stopping in Istanbul. "No, I am going straight through." "Isn't that a pity? I traveled this way 2 years ago and spent 3 days in Istanbul then." "I see. Well, I must say I'm glad of that, since I'm going straight through myself." He gave a slightly awkward little bow, a flush creeping up his neck. "Our colonel is susceptible to female charms," thought Hercule Poirot with amusement. It was a pleasant thought. A railway journey can be as conducive to romance as a voyage by sea. Miss Debenham said that it was very nice, but her tone was somewhat restrained. Poirot noticed that the colonel escorted her back to her compartment. Later, the train entered the picturesque Taurus Mountains. As they passed the Cilician gates, Poirot, standing near the 2 English people, heard the girl whisper with a sigh, "It's so beautiful. I wish... You wish what?" "I wish I could enjoy it." Arbuthnot did not answer. The line of his jaw grew rigid. "God knows," he said, "I wish you were out of all this." "Hush, please. Hush." "Oh, it's all right." The colonel shot a displeased look in Poirot's direction. "I just hate to think of you as a governess, at the beck and call of tiresome mothers and their tiresome brats." She laughed, her cool reserve momentarily vanishing. "Oh, you mustn't worry. The downtrodden governess is a thing of the past. I assure you, it's the parents who are afraid of me." They fell silent. Arbuthnot seemed embarrassed by his outburst. "A curious little comedy is playing out here," Poirot noted. It was a memory he was to recall more than once. They reached Cognac late that night, at 11:30. The 2 English people got out to stretch their legs, pacing up and down the snowy platform. Poirot was content to observe the bustling life of the station through the window. However, after 10 minutes, he decided that a little fresh air would do him no harm. He prepared himself carefully, donning several waistcoats and coats, wrapping himself in mufflers, and pulling galoshes over his elegant boots. Thus encased, he stepped cautiously down the platform and walked toward the far end. It was by their voices alone that he identified the 2 dark figures standing in the shadow of a baggage van. Arbuthnot was speaking. "Mary," the girl interrupted him, her voice strained. No, not now. When it's all over, when it's behind us, then..." Poirot slipped away unnoticed. He was puzzled. He had hardly recognized the voice of Miss Debenham, usually so cool and efficient. "Curious," he murmured to himself. The next day, it seemed to him that the 2 English people had quarreled. They spoke very little. The girl appeared anxious. There were dark shadows under her eyes. At 2:30 that afternoon, the train came to an unexpected halt. Passengers leaned out of the windows. A small group of men stood by the tracks, pointing and gesturing toward the undercarriage of the dining car. Poirot leaned out and hailed a passing conductor. The man explained the situation. Poirot drew his head back in and turned, nearly colliding with Mary Debenham, who was standing right behind him. "What is it?" she asked in French, her voice breathless with agitation. "Why, we stopped." "It is nothing, mademoiselle. Something caught fire under the dining car. Nothing serious. It has already been extinguished, and they are repairing the damage now. I assure you, there is no danger." She made a quick, impatient gesture, as if the threat of fire were the least of her concerns. Yes, I understand that. But the time. We shall be late." "It is possible, yes," Poirot agreed, "but I cannot be late. The train is due in at 6:55. I have to cross the Bosphorus and catch the Simplon Orient Express at 9 o'clock. If we are delayed by even an hour or 2, I shall miss my connection." "It is quite possible," Poirot said. He watched her with curiosity. Her hand on the window frame was trembling. Her lips were twitching. "Is it so very important to you, mademoiselle?" "Yes, it is vital. I must catch that train." She turned away and walked down the corridor, to meet Colonel Arbuthnot. Her fears, however, proved groundless. Within 10 minutes, the train was moving again. It made up for lost time and arrived at Haydarpasa only 5 minutes late. The Bosphorus was choppy that day, and M. Poirot did not enjoy the crossing. On the ferry, he lost sight of his fellow travelers and did not see them again. Upon arriving at the Galata Bridge, he drove straight to the Hotel Tokatlian. Chapter to the Tokatlian Hotel. At the Tokatlian, Hercule Poirot, booked a room with a bath. Then he stepped up to the concierge's desk and asked if there were any letters for him. 3 letters and a telegram were waiting. At the sight of the telegram, his eyebrows rose in surprise. It was the last thing he had expected. In his usual slow and methodical manner, Poirot unfolded the form. The clearly printed text read, "Unexpected complications have arisen in the Kastner case. As you predicted, please return at once. Voilà si qu'est evident. Voilà si qui a un biton." Poirot muttered irritably, "How very annoying." He glanced at his watch. "I shall have to leave today," he told the concierge. "At what time does the Simplon Orient Express depart?" "At 9 o'clock, monsieur. Can you get me a sleeper ticket?" "Certainly, monsieur. At this time of year, it is no trouble at all. The trains are nearly empty. Would you like first or second class?" "First class." "Very good, monsieur. And the destination?" "London." "Understood. I will secure your ticket to London and reserve a place in the Istanbul Calais sleeping car." Poirot looked at his watch again. It was 10 minutes to 8. "Do I have time for dinner?" "Of course, monsieur." Poirot nodded. He went to the reception desk, canceled his room, and made his way across the hall to the restaurant. Poirot was ordering his meal when a hand was laid on his shoulder. "Ah, mon vieux, mon vieux," came a voice from behind him. "The last person I expected to see." Poirot turned around. A stout, elderly man with a head of stiff, gray hair was smiling broadly at him. Poirot jumped up. "Monsieur Book." "Monsieur Poirot." Monsieur Book was a fellow Belgian and a director of the International Sleeping Car Company. His friendship with a former star of the Belgian police force went back many years. "You are far from home, my old friend," said Monsieur Book. "I have been settling a small matter in Syria." "I see. And when do you return?" "Tonight." "Splendid. I am traveling too. Well, only as far as Lausanne, on business. I assume you are taking the Simplon Orient Express." "Yes. I have just asked for a compartment. I intended to stay here for a few days, but I received a telegram calling me back to England on urgent business." "Ah, business," sighed Monsieur Book. "But you are a world celebrity now, my friend." "I have had some small success," said Poirot, trying to look modest, though he did not quite succeed. Book laughed. "We shall meet later," he said. Poirot then focused all his attention on keeping his long mustache out of the soup. Having managed that, he began to observe the other guests while waiting for his main course. There were only about half a dozen people in the restaurant, but Poirot was interested in only 2 of them. They sat not far from him. The younger man was a pleasant-looking American in his 30s. However, it was the older man who caught the detective's eye, a man in his 60s or perhaps 70s. At first glance, he had the benevolent look of a typical philanthropist, a balding head, a high forehead, and a smile that revealed 2 rows of incredibly white false teeth. Everything suggested a kind nature. Only his eyes, small, deep-set, and calculating, contradicted this impression, and not the eyes alone. After saying something to his companion, the old man scanned the room. His gaze rested on Poirot for a moment, and for a second a flash of unexplained malice and unease crossed his face. He stood up immediately. "Pay the bill, Hector," he directed. His voice was slightly husky, carrying a strange, soft undertone of menace. When Poirot met his friend in the lounge, the Americans were leaving the hotel. The porter was carrying their luggage to a car, with the younger man supervising. Then he opened the glass door and said, "Everything is ready, Mr. Ratchett. The old man grunted and walked out. "What do you think of that pair?" Poirot asked. "They are Americans," said Monsieur Book, Audiobook. "That is obvious. I meant, how do they strike you?" "The young man seems pleasant enough. And the other? To tell you the truth, my friend, he produced a most unpleasant impression on me. I did not like him at all. And you?" Poirot paused before answering. When he passed by me in a restaurant, Poirot said at last, "I had a strange sensation, as though a wild beast, or rather a beast of prey, had passed me by. You understand? A true predator. And yet he looks most respectable." "Precisely. The body is like a cage. From the outside, all is very respectable. But through the bars, a predator looks out. You have a vivid imagination, my old friend," said Monsieur Book. "Perhaps. But I cannot rid myself of the impression that evil itself has passed close to me." "You mean that respectable American?" "Yes, that respectable American." "Well," said Monsieur Book cheerfully, "perhaps you are right. There is so much evil in the world." The doors opened, and the concierge approached them, looking troubled and apologetic. "It is unbelievable, monsieur. Every first-class berth on the train is sold out." "What?" cried Monsieur Book. "Now, in the off-season, there must be a group of journalists or a political delegation traveling." "I do not know, sir," the concierge replied, standing respectfully. "But a compartment is impossible to find." "No matter, Monsieur Book," said Poirot. "Do not worry, my friend. We will think of something. As a last resort, we always keep one compartment in reserve, number 16. The conductor always holds it." He smiled and glanced at his watch. "It is time to go." At the station, Monsieur Book was respectfully greeted by the sleeping car conductor, dressed in his brown uniform. "Good evening, monsieur. You are in compartment number 1. He summoned the porters, and they wheeled the luggage toward the coach, which bore a metal plate. "Istanbul, Trieste, Calais. I hear you are full tonight." "It is extraordinary, monsieur. It seems the whole world has decided to travel tonight. And yet, you must find a compartment for this gentleman. He is my friend. You may give him number 16. "It is taken, monsieur." "What? Even 16 is taken?" They exchanged a knowing look, and the conductor, a tall, pale man of middle age, smiled. "As I told you, monsieur, every single place is occupied." "What is going on here?" Monsieur Book muttered irritably. "Is there a conference somewhere? Or a delegation?" "No, monsieur, it is pure chance. By simple coincidence, all these people decided to leave today." Monsieur Book clicked his tongue in annoyance. "In Belgrade, he said. They will attach the Athens coach and the Bucharest to Paris coach, but we won't reach Belgrade until tomorrow night. So the question is where to put you for tonight. Is there no vacancy in the second class?" he asked the conductor. "There is one place in the second class, monsieur." "Well then, the trouble is, it can only take a woman. A German maid is already traveling there." "How unfortunate," said Monsieur Book. "Do not be distressed, my friend." Poirot consoled him. "I can travel in an ordinary carriage." "Certainly not." Monsieur Book turned back to the conductor. "Tell me, is every seat really taken?" "To tell the truth, one place is still vacant," the conductor replied after a moment. "Go on." "Berth number 7, in the second class. The passenger has not yet arrived, and there are only 4 minutes left until departure." "Who is it?" "An Englishman." The conductor glanced at his list. "A Mr. A.M. Harris." "A good omen," said Poirot. "If I have not forgotten my Dickens, Mr. Harris will not appear. Take the gentleman's luggage to number 7, Monsieur Book commanded. And if this Mr. Harris shows up, tell him he is too late. We cannot hold a place for so long. In short, settle it somehow. Why should I care about Mr. Harris?" "As you wish," said the conductor. He directed the porter where to take the luggage, then stepped back to let Poirot onto the train. "At the very end, monsieur," he called out. "Your compartment is the second from the last." Poirot moved slowly, as almost all the passengers were crowding the corridor. He apologized repeatedly with the regularity of clockwork. Finally reaching his assigned compartment, he found the tall young American from the Tokatlian hotel inside, tossing a suitcase onto the rack. Seeing Poirot, the young man frowned. "Excuse me," he said. "I'm afraid you made a mistake." He then carefully repeated in French, "Je crois que vous avez un erreur. Je crois que vous avez un erreur." Poirot replied in English, "Are you Mr. Harris?" "No, my name is McQueen. At that moment, the apologetic, breathless voice of the conductor came from behind Poirot. "There are no other berths on the train, monsieur. The gentleman will have to travel in your compartment." With these words, the conductor lowered the window in the corridor and began taking Poirot's luggage from the porter. Poirot was amused by the apologetic tone in the conductor's voice. He felt certain the man had been promised a handsome tip to keep the compartment private. However, even the most generous tip is powerless against an order from the company's director. After tossing the suitcases onto the rack, the conductor emerged from the compartment. "Everything is in order, monsieur. Your place is number 7, the upper berth. The train departs in 1 minute." He then hurried to the end of the corridor. Poirot returned to the compartment. "Where has it ever been seen for a conductor to haul the luggage himself?" he remarked cheerfully. "If I told anyone, they would not believe it." His traveling companion smiled. He had evidently overcome his irritation, deciding to take this inconvenience philosophically. "The train is strangely full to the brim," he said. The station master's whistle blew, followed by a long, mournful hoot from the engine. Both men stepped out into the corridor. A cry rang out from the platform. "En voiture! En voiture! All aboard!" "Here we go," said McQueen. But they did not move yet. The whistle blew again. "Look here, sir," the young man said suddenly. "Perhaps you would like the lower berth? It's more convenient. And all that, honestly, it makes no difference to me which one I take." A pleasant young man, Poirot thought to himself. No, not at all," he protested. "I would not wish to put you out. Really, I don't mind. But I should feel quite uncomfortable." A polite exchange of courtesies followed. "I shall only be here for 1 night," Poirot explained. "In Belgrade." "I see. Are you getting off at Belgrade?" "Not exactly. You see, the carriage gave a sudden lurch." The men turned to the window and watched as the long, light-flooded platform began to slide past them. The Orient Express had set off on its 3-day journey across Europe. Chapter 3. Poirot refuses a client. The following day, Hercule Poirot arrived at the dining car for lunch a little late. He had risen early, breakfasted almost in solitude, and spent the morning poring over the notes of the case that had recalled him to London. He had seen very little of his traveling companion. Monsieur Book, who was already seated, waved a hand in greeting, inviting his friend to take the seat opposite. Poirot soon realized the privilege of his position. He was served first, and the choicest portions were set before him. The food, it must be said, was remarkably good. It was not until they reached the delicate cream cheese that Monsieur Book allowed his attention to wander from the meal. He had reached that stage of satisfaction when a man turns to philosophy. "If I had the talent of Balzac," he sighed, "I would surely describe this." He swept his hand around the restaurant car. "A pleasant thought," said Poirot. "Do you not agree? It seems to me that such a thing has never been done in literature. And yet there is a romance to it, my friend. Look around us. People of all classes, all nationalities, all ages. For 3 days, these total strangers are inseparable. They sleep and eat under one roof. 3 days pass, and they go their separate ways, never to meet again. And yet," said Poirot, "imagine if there were an accident. God forbid, my friend. I understand that from your perspective it would be most undesirable. Still, let's imagine the possibility for a moment. Suppose all these people gathered here were united by, shall we say, for example, death. Would you like some more wine? Monsieur Book suggested, hastily refilling the glasses. You are in a gloomy mood, my friend. Perhaps it is a digestion. You are right in one thing. Poirot agreed. My stomach is ill-adapted to Syrian cuisine. He sipped his wine. Leaning back in his chair, he let his eyes wander thoughtfully across the car. 13 people were seated in the restaurant, and as Monsieur Book had rightly noted, they represented a vast array of classes and nationalities. Poirot studied them intently. At the table opposite sat 3 men. The waiter, with his unerring instinct for those traveling alone, had grouped them together. A dark, burly Italian was picking his teeth with gusto. Opposite him sat a thin, fastidious Englishman with the sour, expressionless face of a servant from a high-class house. Beside the Englishman sprawled a large American in a flamboyant jacket, likely a commercial traveler. In our business, it's the scale that counts, he was saying in a loud, nasal voice. The Italian, removing the toothpick from his mouth, waved it in the air. You speak the truth. That is exactly what I say, he replied. The Englishman looked out the window and cleared his throat. Poirot moved his gaze further down the car. At a small table sat an old woman, straight as a rod and exceptionally ugly. Yet her ugliness was of a strange kind. It was more fascinating than repulsive. Her neck was draped in several rows of very large pearls, genuine ones, though it was hard to believe. Her fingers were heavy with rings. A sable coat was draped over her shoulders. An elegant velvet toque did little to flatter her sallow, toad-like face. Calmly and politely, yet with an air of absolute command, she spoke to the waiter. Be so good as to see that a bottle of mineral water and a large glass of orange juice are placed in my compartment. And see to it that for dinner they prepare a chicken, no sauce of any kind, and boiled fish. The waiter respectfully assured her that everything would be done. She gave a gracious nod and rose. Her gaze lingered for a moment on Poirot, then swept past it with a truly aristocratic indifference. That is Princess Dragomirov, Monsieur Book whispered. She is Russian. Her husband moved all their assets abroad long before the revolution. She is fabulously wealthy, a true cosmopolitan. Poirot nodded. He had heard of Princess Dragomirov. A remarkable character, said Monsieur Book. Ugly as sin, but she knows how to command respect. Do you agree? Poirot did agree. At another, larger table sat Mary Debenham and 2 other women. One was a tall, middle-aged person in a plaid blouse and a tweed skirt, with faded yellow hair gathered in a large bun, a style that did nothing for her glasses or her long, sheep-like face. She was listening intently to the third woman, a stout, elderly American with a pleasant face. The latter was talking in a slow, drony voice, never pausing even to catch her breath. And then my daughter says, we cannot apply our American methods in this country. The people here are naturally lazy. They simply cannot hurry. And yet, our college has achieved remarkable success. They have such wonderful teachers there. Yes, education is a great thing. We must introduce our Western ideals and ensure that the East recognizes them. My daughter says... The train plunged into a tunnel, and the drony voice was drowned out. Further down at a small table, Colonel Arbuthnot sat in complete solitude. He did not take his eyes off the back of Mary Debenham's head. Now they were sitting apart, though nothing had prevented them from sitting together. What was the reason? Perhaps, Poirot thought, it was Mary Debenham who insisted on this. A governess must be careful. She cannot afford to neglect the proprieties. A girl who is to earn her own living must be prudent. He shifted his gaze to the tables on the other side of the car. At the far end, right against the wall, sat a middle-aged woman dressed in black, with a large, expressionless face. German or Swedish, he thought. In all probability, the German maid. At the next table, a man and a woman were talking animatedly, leaning toward each other. Despite his loose-fitting English-cut tweed suit, The man was clearly not English, although Poirot could only see him from behind. The shape and set of his head betrayed his continental origin. He was a tall man, well-built. Suddenly he turned his head, and Poirot saw his profile. He was a very handsome man of about 30, with a large blonde mustache. The woman sitting opposite appeared quite young, 20 at most. She was dressed in a tight-fitting black suit and a white English blouse. An elegant black hat, tilted to one side, seemed to stay on her head only by miracle. She possessed an exotic, unusual beauty, matte pale skin, enormous brown eyes, and jet black hair. She smoked a cigarette in an exceptionally long holder. The nails on her manicured hands were blood red. A single ring, a large emerald set in platinum, sparkled on her finger. Her demeanor suggested a flirtatious nature. "Elle est jolie et chic," Poirot murmured. "Husband and wife, I presume?" Monsieur Book nodded. "I believe they are from the Hungarian embassy," he said. "A handsome couple." Except for Poirot, only McQueen and his employer, Mr. Ratchett, had not yet finished their lunch. The latter sat opposite Poirot, who once again studied that unpleasant face, noting the deceptive benevolence of the features and the sinister expression of the tiny eyes. Monsieur Book clearly noticed the change in his friend's expression. "Are you looking at the wild beast?" he asked. Poirot nodded. At that moment, Poirot's coffee was served, and Monsieur Book rose. Having started his meal earlier, he had finished some time ago. "I am going to my compartment," he said. "Come and have a chat when you are finished." "With pleasure." Poirot slowly sipped his coffee and ordered a liqueur. The waiter was making his rounds, collecting payments and placing the money in a small box. The plaintive voice of the elderly American woman echoed through the dining car. "My daughter tells me, get a book of meal tickets and you won't have a care in the world." Some chance, no cares indeed. And now it turns out you have to give a 10% tip and pay for mineral water. And even the water is somehow suspicious. They don't have Evian or Vichy. What are we supposed to make of that? They must, how do you say in English? They must give the local water, the lady with the sheep-like face explained. Well, I still don't understand it. The American woman looked with distaste at the pile of small change before her. "Look at what he's given me. Are these dinars or not? They look very questionable to me. My daughter says—" Miss Debenham pushed back her chair and, with a nod to her companions, departed. Colonel Arbuthnot rose and followed her, behind him, having gathered her despised dinars, when the American, followed by the lady with the sheep-like face. The Hungarians had left even earlier, and now only Poirot, Ratchett, and McQueen remained in the restaurant. Ratchett said something to his secretary, who then rose and headed for the exit. Ratchett also stood up, but instead of following McQueen, he unexpectedly sat down in the chair opposite Poirot. "Do you happen to have a light?" he asked. His voice was low and slightly nasal. "My name is Ratchett." Poirot bowed slightly, reached into his pocket, took out a box of matches, and handed it to his companion. Ratchett took the box but did not light a cigarette. "If I am not mistaken," he said, "I have the honor of speaking to Mr. Hercule Poirot. Is that correct?" Poirot bowed again. "Quite correct, monsieur." The detective felt the man's malevolent little eyes boring into him, as if Ratchett were evaluating him before speaking again. "In my country," he said at last, "we are used to taking the bull by the horns. Monsieur Poirot, I want to offer you a job." Poirot raised his eyebrows. "I have greatly limited my circle of clients, monsieur. These days, I only take on exceptional cases." "I quite understand, but we are talking about big money, Monsieur Poirot." He repeated it softly and suggestively. "Very big money." Poirot remained silent for a minute or two, then said, "What kind of work is it that you wish me to undertake for you, Mr. Ratchett?" "Monsieur Poirot, I am a wealthy man, a very wealthy man, and people in my position tend to have enemies. I have an enemy." "Only one? What do you mean by that?" Ratchett snapped. "Monsieur, my experience suggests that when a man has enemies, as you put it, it rarely stops at just one. Poirot's answer seemed to calm Ratchett. "I see what you mean," he said. "Enemy or enemies, it doesn't really matter. What matters is protecting me from them and ensuring my safety." "Safety? My life is in danger, Monsieur Poirot. I should tell you that I can look after myself." He pulled a small automatic pistol from his jacket pocket. "I'm no fool, and I'm not easily caught off guard," he continued grimly. "However, I think it makes sense to take extra precautions. I believe you are exactly the man I need, and I won't be stingy with the money. Mind you, big money." Poirot looked at Ratchett thoughtfully. Several minutes passed. The great detective's face was a mask of inscrutability. "I am very sorry, monsieur," he said at last, "but I cannot accept your offer." Ratchett looked at him with a knowing air. "Name your figure," he suggested. Poirot shook his head. "You do not understand, monsieur. I have achieved a certain success in my profession. I have earned enough money to satisfy not only my needs, but also my caprices. Therefore, I now take only such cases as interest me." "You've got a tight grip," said Ratchett. "Well then, would $20,000 tempt you?" "No, monsieur. If you're trying to bleed me for more, it won't work. I know it's what." "And so do I, Mr. Ratchett. Then what is it about my offer that doesn't satisfy you?" Poirot rose. "If you will forgive the personal loyalty," said Poirot. Chapter 3. Poirot refuses a client. The following day, Hercule Poirot arrived at the dining car for lunch a little late. He had risen early, breakfasted almost in solitude, and spent the morning poring over the notes of the case that had recalled him to London. He had seen very little of his traveling companion. Monsieur Book, who was already seated, waved a hand in greeting, inviting his friend to take the seat opposite. Poirot soon realized the privilege of his position. He was served first, and the choicest portions were set before him. The food, it must be said, was remarkably good. It was not until they reached the delicate cream cheese that Monsieur Book allowed his attention to wander from the meal. He had reached that stage of satisfaction when a man turns to philosophy. "If I had the talent of Balzac," he sighed, "I would surely describe this." He swept his hand around the restaurant car. "A pleasant thought," said Poirot. "Do you not agree? It seems to me that such a thing has never been done in literature. And yet there is a romance to it, my friend. Look around us. People of all classes, all nationalities, all ages. For 3 days, these total strangers are inseparable. They sleep and eat under one roof. 3 days pass, and they go their separate ways, never to meet again. And yet," said Poirot, "imagine if there were an accident." "God forbid, my friend." "I understand that from your perspective it would be most undesirable. Still, let's imagine the possibility for a moment. Suppose all these people gathered here were united by, shall we say, for example, death. Would you like some more wine?" Monsieur Book suggested, hastily refilling the glasses. "You are in a gloomy mood, my friend. Perhaps it is a digestion." "You are right in one thing," Poirot agreed. "My stomach is ill adapted to Syrian cuisine." He sipped his wine. Leaning back in his chair, he let his eyes wander thoughtfully across the car. 13 people were seated in the restaurant, and as Monsieur Book had rightly noted, they represented a vast array of classes and nationalities. Poirot studied them intently. At the table opposite sat 3 men. The waiter, with his unerring instinct for those traveling alone, had grouped them together. A dark, burly Italian was picking his teeth with gusto. Opposite him sat a thin, fastidious Englishman with the sour, expressionless face of a servant from a high-class house. Beside the Englishman sprawled a large American in a flamboyant jacket, likely a commercial traveler. "In our business, it's the scale that counts," he was saying in a loud, nasal voice. The Italian, removing the toothpick from his mouth, waved it in the air. "You speak the truth. That is exactly what I say," he replied. The Englishman looked out the window and cleared his throat. Poirot moved his gaze further down the car. At a small table sat an old woman, straight as a rod and exceptionally ugly. Yet her ugliness was of a strange kind. It was more fascinating than repulsive. Her neck was draped in several rows of very large pearls, genuine ones, though it was hard to believe. Her fingers were heavy with rings. A sable coat was draped over her shoulders. An elegant velvet toque did little to flatter her sallow, toad-like face. Calmly and politely, yet with an air of absolute command, she spoke to the waiter. "Be so good as to see that a bottle of mineral water and a large glass of orange juice are placed in my compartment. And see to it that for dinner they prepare a chicken, no sauce of any kind, and boiled fish." The waiter respectfully assured her that everything would be done. She gave a gracious nod and rose. Her gaze lingered for a moment on Poirot, then swept past it with a truly aristocratic indifference. "That is Princess Dragomirov," Monsieur Book whispered. "She is Russian. Her husband moved all their assets abroad long before the revolution. She is fabulously wealthy, a true cosmopolitan." Poirot nodded. He had heard of Princess Dragomirov. "A remarkable character," said Monsieur Book. "Ugly as sin, but she knows how to command respect. Do you agree?" Poirot did agree. At another, larger table sat Mary Debenham and two other women. One was a tall, middle-aged person in a plaid blouse and a tweed skirt, with faded yellow hair gathered in a large bun, a style that did nothing for her glasses or her long, sheep-like face. She was listening intently to the third woman, a stout, elderly American with a pleasant face. The latter was talking in a slow, drony voice, never pausing even to catch her breath. "And then my daughter says, we cannot apply our American methods in this country. The people here are naturally lazy. They simply cannot hurry. And yet, our college has achieved remarkable success. They have such wonderful teachers there. Yes, education is a great thing. We must introduce our Western ideals and ensure that the East recognizes them. My daughter says..." The train plunged into a tunnel, and the drony voice was drowned out. Further down, at a small table, Colonel Arbuthnot sat in complete solitude. He did not take his eyes off the back of Mary Debenham's head. Now they were sitting apart, though nothing had prevented them from sitting together. What was the reason? Perhaps, Poirot thought, it was Mary Debenham who insisted on this. A governess must be careful. She cannot afford to neglect the proprieties. A girl who has to earn her own living must be prudent. He shifted his gaze to the tables on the other side of the car. At the far end, right against the wall, sat a middle-aged woman dressed in black, with a large, expressionless face. German or Swedish, he thought. In all probability, the German maid. At the next table, a man and a woman were talking animatedly, leaning toward each other. Despite his loose-fitting English-cut tweed suit, the man was clearly not English. Although Poirot could only see him from behind, the shape and set of his head betrayed his continental origin. He was a tall man, well-built. Suddenly he turned his head, and Poirot saw his profile. He was a very handsome man of about 30, with a large blonde mustache. The woman sitting opposite appeared quite young, 20 at most. She was dressed in a tight-fitting black suit and a white English blouse. An elegant black hat, tilted to one side, seemed to stay on her head only by a miracle. She possessed an exotic, unusual beauty, matte pale skin, enormous brown eyes, and jet black hair. She smoked a cigarette in an exceptionally long holder. The nails on her manicured hands were blood red. A single ring, a large emerald set in platinum, sparkled on her finger. Her demeanor suggested a flirtatious nature. "Elle est jolie et chic," Poirot murmured. "Husband and wife, I presume?" Monsieur Book nodded. "I believe they are from the Hungarian embassy," he said. "A handsome couple." Except for Poirot, only McQueen and his employer, Mr. Ratchett, had not yet finished their lunch. The latter sat opposite Poirot, who once again studied that unpleasant face, noting the deceptive benevolence of the features and the sinister expression of the tiny eyes. Monsieur Book clearly noticed a change in his friend's expression. "Are you looking at the wild beast?" he asked. Poirot nodded. At that moment, Poirot's coffee was served, and Monsieur Book rose. Having started his meal earlier, he had finished some time ago. "I am going to my compartment," he said. "Come and have a chat when you are finished." "With pleasure." Poirot slowly sipped his coffee and ordered a liqueur. The waiter was making his rounds, collecting payments and placing the money in a small box. The plaintive voice of the elderly American woman echoed through the dining car. "My daughter tells me, get a book of meal tickets and you won't have a care in the world." Some chance, no cares indeed. And now it turns out you have to give a 10% tip and pay for mineral water. And even the water is somehow suspicious. They don't have Evian or Vichy. What are we supposed to make of that? They must, how do you say in English? They must give the local water, the lady with the sheep-like face explained. Well, I still don't understand it. The American woman looked with distaste at the pile of small change before her. "Look at what he's given me. Are these dinars or not? They look very questionable to me. My daughter says—" Miss Debenham pushed back her chair and, with a nod to her companions, departed. Colonel Arbuthnot rose and followed her, behind him, having gathered her despised dinars, when the American, followed by the lady with the sheep-like face, the Hungarians had left even earlier, and now only Poirot, Ratchett, and McQueen remained in the restaurant. Ratchett said something to his secretary, who then rose and headed for the exit. Ratchett also stood up, but instead of following McQueen, he unexpectedly sat down in the chair opposite Poirot. "Do you happen to have a light?" he asked. His voice was low and slightly nasal. "My name is Ratchett." Poirot bowed slightly, reached into his pocket, took out a box of matches, and handed it to his companion. Ratchett took the box but did not light a cigarette. "If I am not mistaken," he said, "I have the honor of speaking to Mr. Hercule Poirot. Is that correct?" Poirot bowed again. "Quite correct, monsieur." The detective felt the man's malevolent little eyes boring into him, as if Ratchett were evaluating him before speaking again. "In my country," he said at last, "we are used to taking the bull by the horns. Monsieur Poirot, I want to offer you a job." Poirot raised his eyebrows. "I have greatly limited my circle of clients, monsieur. These days, I only take on exceptional cases." "I quite understand, but we are talking about big money, Monsieur Poirot." He repeated it softly and suggestively. "Very big money." Poirot remained silent for a minute or two, then said, "What kind of work is it that you wish me to undertake for you, Mr. Ratchett?" "Monsieur Poirot, I am a wealthy man, a very wealthy man, and people in my position tend to have enemies. I have an enemy. Only one. What do you mean by that?" Ratchett snapped. "Monsieur, my experience suggests that when a man has enemies, as you put it, it rarely stops at just one." Poirot's answer seemed to calm Ratchett. "I see what you mean," he said. "Enemy or enemies, it doesn't really matter. What matters is protecting me from them and ensuring my safety." "Safety? My life is in danger, Monsieur Poirot. I should tell you that I can look after myself." He pulled a small automatic pistol from his jacket pocket. "I'm no fool, and I'm not easily caught off guard," he continued grimly. "However, I think it makes sense to take extra precautions. I believe you are exactly the man I need, and I won't be stingy with the money. Mind you, big money." Poirot looked at Ratchett thoughtfully. Several minutes passed. The great detective's face was a mask of inscrutability. "I am very sorry, monsieur," he said at last, "but I cannot accept your offer." Ratchett looked at him with a knowing air. "Name your figure," he suggested. Poirot shook his head. "You do not understand, monsieur. I have achieved a certain success in my profession. I have earned enough money to satisfy not only my needs, but also my caprices. Therefore, I now take only such cases as interest me." "You've got a tight grip," said Ratchett. "Well then, would $20,000 tempt you?" "No, monsieur. If you're trying to bleed me for more, it won't work." "I know it's what." "And so do I, Mr. Ratchett. Then what is it about my offer that doesn't satisfy you?" Poirot rose. "If you will forgive the personal loyalty," said Poirot, I do not like your face, Mr. Ratchett. And with that, he left the car. Chapter 4. A Cry in the Night. The Simplon Orient Express arrived at Belgrade at 8:45. It was scheduled for a half-hour stop, so Poirot stepped out onto the platform. However, his walk was short-lived. It was bitterly cold, and a blizzard was blowing. The platform roof offered poor protection, and Poirot soon returned to his carriage. The conductor, who was vigorously clapping his hands and stamping his feet to keep warm, addressed him. "Your suitcases, monsieur, have been moved to compartment number 1. It was previously occupied by Monsieur Book." "And where is Monsieur Book?" "He has moved to the Athens coach, which has just been attached." Poirot went to find his friend, but Monsieur Book waved his concerns away decisively. "It is nothing. It is better this way. You are going through to England, and it is more convenient for you to reach Calais without changing. I am quite comfortable here. The carriage is nearly empty, only myself and a Greek doctor. What wretched weather, my friend. They say there has not been such a snowfall for many years. Let us hope the drifts do not delay us. I must admit they worry me greatly." At exactly 9:15, the train pulled out. Shortly after, Poirot rose, wished Monsieur Book good night, and returned to his own carriage, located just behind the dining car. On the second day of the journey, the barriers between the passengers began to break down. Colonel Arbuthnot was standing at the door of his compartment, talking with Mr. McQueen. When he saw Poirot, McQueen broke off mid-sentence, a look of intense surprise on his face. "Why, how is this?" he exclaimed. "I thought you had left us. You said you were getting off at Belgrade." "You misunderstood me." Poirot smiled. "I remember now." Just as we began to speak of it, the train started to move. "But what about your luggage? Where did it go?" "It was simply moved to another compartment. That is all." "I see." He resumed his conversation with Arbuthnot, and Poirot passed on. 2 doors down from his compartment, the elderly American Mrs. Hubbard was talking to a sheep-like Swedish lady. Mrs. Hubbard was pressing a magazine upon her. "No, no, take it. My dear, please take it. I have plenty to read. Terrible cold, isn't it?" She gave Poirot a friendly nod. "I do not know how to thank you," the Swedish lady said. "It is nothing. Get a good night's sleep, and your head will feel better in the morning. It is only my cold. I shall go and make myself a cup of tea. Do you have aspirin? Are you sure? I have plenty to spare. Good night, my dear." As soon as her companion had left, the American woman turned to Poirot. "That poor Swedish soul. As I understand it, she works in some kind of mission, teaching, I believe. A kind creature, but a pity she speaks English so poorly. She was very interested to hear about my daughter." By now, Poirot knew everything there was to know about Mrs. Hubbard's daughter. So did the other passengers, at least those who understood English. He knew how she and her husband worked at a large American college in Smyrna, how this was Mrs. Hubbard's first trip to the East, how untidy the Turks were, and how dreadful their roads were. The door of the next compartment opened. A thin, pale valet stepped out. Poirot caught a glimpse of Ratchett sitting on his bed. At the sight of Poirot, Ratchett's face darkened with malice. The door was instantly shut. Mrs. Hubbard drew Poirot aside. "You know, I am deathly afraid of that man." "No, not the valet, his master." "Some master. I am suspicious of him. My daughter always says I have very strong intuition. If Mama doesn't like someone, she says there's a reason for it. And I took a dislike to that man immediately. And to think he is my neighbor. Last night, I even piled my suitcases against the door. I thought I heard him rattling the handle. Honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if he turned out to be one of those trained murderers. Perhaps it is just foolish fear, but I cannot help myself. I am scared to death of him. My daughter told me I'd be home before I knew it. But my heart is still uneasy. I feel as though something terrible is about to happen. And how that nice young man can work for him is beyond me." McQueen and Colonel Arbuthnot came toward them. Come to my place, McQueen was saying. My bed isn't made up yet. Now, tell me frankly, why your policy in India? The men disappeared into McQueen's compartment. Mrs. Hubbard said her goodbyes to Poirot. I think I'll turn in and read for a bit, she said. Good night. Good night, madam. Poirot went into his compartment, which was next to Ratchett's. He undressed, got into bed, read for half an hour, and switched off the light. A few hours later, he woke up with a start. He had been awakened by a loud groan, almost a cry, somewhere close by. That much he remembered. And almost at the same moment, a bell rang. Poirot sat up and switched on the light. He noticed the train was at a standstill, perhaps at a station. The cry had unsettled him. Remembering that Ratchett was in the next compartment, he got up and peered into the corridor. The conductor came running from the far end of the coach and knocked on Ratchett's door. Poirot watched through a crack in his own door. The conductor knocked a second time. At that moment, another bell rang, and a light began to flash further down the corridor. The conductor looked around. From behind the door of the next compartment, a voice said, "Sonnez rein, Jamie Swede Tromp." "Very well, monsieur," the conductor replied, hurrying off toward the door where the light was flashing. Sighing with relief, Poirot lay down. Before turning out the light, he glanced at his watch. It was 20 minutes to 1. Chapter 5. The Crime. It was some time before Poirot fell asleep. To begin with, the stillness of the train was restless. If this was a station, why was the platform so silent? Inside the carriage, however, it was quite noisy. Poirot could hear Ratchett moving about in the next compartment. The rattle of a wash basin plug, the sound of running water, a splash, and then the rattle of the plug again. Footsteps shuffled along the corridor. Someone was walking in slippers. Poirot lay awake, staring at the ceiling. Why was it so quiet at the station? His throat felt dry. As luck would have it, he had forgotten to ask for mineral water. He looked at his watch again. 1:15. He decided to ring for the conductor and ask for water. He reached for the bell, but his hand paused halfway. In the surrounding silence, another bell rang out loudly. There was no point in ringing yet. The conductor could not answer 2 calls at once. Ting, ting, ting. The bell rang insistently. Where was the conductor? Whoever was ringing was clearly impatient. Ting. The passenger was now holding their finger on the button. At last, the conductor appeared, his footsteps echoing loudly in the empty corridor. He knocked on a door not far from Poirot's compartment. Voices could be heard. The conductor's, persuasive and apologetic in a woman's, insistent and persistent. It was, of course, Mrs. Hubbard. Poirot smiled. The argument, if it was an argument, went on for quite some time. Mrs. Hubbard did most of the talking, with the conductor only occasionally managing to get a word in. Finally, the matter was settled. Poirot clearly heard. "Bonne nuit, madame, bonne nuit, madame," and the sound of a closing door. He pressed his own bell. The conductor arrived immediately. He looked flushed and agitated. "De l'eau minérale, s'il vous plaît, de l'eau minérale, s'il vous plaît." "Bien, monsieur, by Miseu." Perhaps noticing the glint of amusement in Poirot's eyes, the conductor decided to unburden his soul. "La dame américaine, la dame américaine." "What?" The conductor wiped the sweat from his forehead. "You have no idea what I have had to endure from her. She insists there is a man hiding in her compartment, and nothing will convince her otherwise. Just think, monsieur, in such a tiny compartment." He gestured around. "Where can anyone hide? I argue with her. I prove it is impossible, but it is no use. She says she woke up and saw a man there. I ask her how he could have left and bolted the door from the inside. She will not listen to reason. As if we do not have enough trouble already. The snowdrifts." "Snowdrifts?" "Yes. Have you not noticed? The train has been stopped for a long time. We have run into a snowdrift. Heaven knows how long we shall be stuck here. I remember once we were held up for an entire week. Where are we? Between Vinkovci and Brod. La, La la, said Poirot irritably. The conductor left and returned with the mineral water. Good night, monsieur. Poirot drank the water and firmly resolved to sleep. He was almost drifting off when he was awakened again. This time, it seemed as though something heavy had struck his door. Poirot sprang up and looked into the corridor. No one. To the right, a woman in a red kimono was retreating. To the left, the conductor was sitting on a small seat, busy with some paperwork. There was a dead silence. My nerves are certainly out of order, Poirot decided, and he returned to bed. This time he fell asleep and did not wake until morning. When he awoke, the train was still standing still. Poirot raised the blind and looked out. Great snowbanks rose up to the very windows. He checked his watch. It was 9:15. At 9:45, neat, fresh, and as dapper as ever, Poirot made his way to the restaurant car. There, a spirit of gloom prevailed. The barriers between the passengers had been completely swept away. A common misfortune had united them. Mrs. Hubbard was complaining the loudest. My daughter assured me this was the easiest way to travel. She said, you just get on and don't get off until Paris. And now it turns out we might be stuck here for goodness knows how long. And my boat sails the day after tomorrow. How am I supposed to catch it? I cannot even request to cancel my ticket. It just drives me out of my mind to think about it. The Italian mentioned he had urgent business in Milan. A large American sympathized. It's a bad business, ma'am, and Express hoped that the train would make up for lost time. And my sister? Her children are meeting me, the Swedish lady said, beginning to cry. I cannot warn them. What will they think? They will think something happened to their aunt. How long shall we be here? Mary Debenham asked. Can anyone answer that? Her voice sounded impatient. But Poirot noticed it lacked that feverish anxiety she had shown when the Taurus Express was delayed. Mrs. Hubbard began to rattle on again. No one in this train knows anything, and no one tries to do anything. What else can you expect from these lazy foreigners? In our country, people would at least try to take action. Arbuthnot turned to Poirot and spoke, carefully pronouncing his French words in an English fashion. Vous êtes un directeur de la ligne. J'ai cru, monsieur. Vous pouvez nous dire. Vous êtes un directeur de la ligne, je crois, messieurs. Vous pouvez nous dire. Poirot, smiling, corrected him. No, no, he said in English. You are mistaken. You have confused me with my friend, Monsieur Book. I am sorry. Not at all. Your mistake is quite understandable. I am occupying compartment that was previously his. Monsieur Book, Messieurs Book, was not in the restaurant car. Poirot looked around to see who else was absent. Missing were Princess Dragomirov and the Hungarian couple, as well as Ratchett his valet and the German lady's maid. The Swedish lady was wiping away tears. I am foolish, she was saying. It is bad of me to cry. Whatever happens, it is all for the best. However, not everyone shared these truly Christian sentiments. That is all very well, McQueen said heatedly, but we don't know how much longer we shall be stuck here. And where exactly are we? What country is this? Can someone please tell me? Mrs. Hubbard asked, nearly in tears. When she was told they were in Yugoslavia, she replied, What else can you expect from these Balkan states? You are the only patient passenger, mademoiselle, Poirot said. Turning to Mary Debenham, she shrugged her shoulders. What else is there to do? You are a philosopher, mademoiselle. That requires detachment, and I am too selfish. I have simply learned not to waste my emotions in vain. She seemed to be speaking to herself rather than to Poirot. She did not even look at him. Her gaze was fixed on the vast snowdrifts outside the window. You have a strong character, mademoiselle, Poirot said softly. I think that of everyone here. You possess the strongest character. Oh, no. I know someone far stronger in spirit than I am. And that is... She suddenly caught herself. It dawned on her that she was talking to a complete stranger, and a foreigner at that, with whom she had not exchanged even a dozen phrases before this morning. She laughed, politely but coldly. For instance, that old lady over there. You have probably noticed her. A very ugly old woman, but there is something compelling about her. If she asks for anything, the whole train rushes to do her bidding. But they also rush to fulfill the wishes of my friend Monsieur Book, Poirot remarked, though not because he knows how to command, but because he is a director of this line. Mary Debenham smiled. Noon was approaching. Several people, Poirot among them, remained in the restaurant car. In such a situation, people preferred to pass the time in company. Poirot heard a great deal of new information about Mrs. Hubbard's daughter and the habits of the late Mr. Hubbard, starting from the moment the venerable gentleman ate his porridge in the morning until he went to bed, wearing socks knitted by Mrs. Hubbard. Poirot was listening to the Swedish lady's somewhat confused account of missionary work when the conductor entered the car and stopped at his table. "May I speak with you, monsieur?" "I am listening." Monsieur Book presents his compliments and asks if you would be so kind as to step over to see him for a few moments. Poirot rose, apologized to the Swedish lady, and followed the conductor. This was not their usual conductor, but another one, a tall, large blond man. Passing through Poirot's car, they went into the next one. After knocking on a door, the conductor let Poirot in. They found themselves not in Monsieur Book's compartment, but in a second-class one, apparently chosen for its larger size. Despite this, it was crowded. Monsieur Book was sitting on a small seat in the far corner. In the other corner, by the window, a stocky, dark-haired man was staring at the snowdrifts. Standing in the passage, blocking Poirot's way, were a tall man in a blue uniform, the train master, and the conductor of the Istanbul to Calais sleeping car. "My dear friend, at last," cried Monsieur Book. "Come in. We need you urgently." The man by the window moved aside. Squeezing through, Poirot sat down opposite his friend. Distress was written all over Monsieur Book's face. Undoubtedly, something extraordinary had happened. "What is the matter?" asked Poirot. "And you still ask. First the snowdrifts and the forced stop, and now this." Monsieur Book's voice broke, and the sleeping car conductor let out a stifled sigh. "What is this?" "This is the fact that in one of the compartments lies a dead passenger. He has been stabbed." In Monsieur Book's quiet voice, there was an undertone of despair. "A passenger? Which passenger?" "An American. His name was—" He glanced at the list line before him. "Ratchett? Am I not mistaken? Ratchett?" "Yes, monsieur," the conductor said, swallowing hard. Poirot looked at the conductor. The man was as white as a sheet. "Let the conductor sit down," said Poirot, "or he will faint." The train master moved. The conductor sank heavily into the seat and covered his face with his hands. "Brrr!" Poirot shuddered. "This is no joke." "What joke?" "Murder is a disaster of the first magnitude in itself. And besides, consider that the circumstances are quite unusual. We are stuck, and might stay here for several hours. What am I saying? For days. And another thing. Almost all countries send representatives of the local police to trains passing through their territory, but they do not do that in Yugoslavia. Do you understand how complicated everything becomes?" "Quite so," said Poirot. "And that is not all. Dr. Constantine, I am sorry. I forgot to introduce you. Dr. Constantine, Monsieur Poirot." The short, dark-haired man and Poirot exchanged bows. Dr. Constantine believes that death occurred around 1 o'clock in the morning. In such cases, it is difficult to be exact, but I think it can be said with certainty that death occurred between midnight and 2 in the morning. "When was Mr. Ratchett last seen alive?" Poirot asked. "It is known that he was alive at 20 minutes to 1 and was talking to the conductor," Monsieur Book replied. "That is correct," said Poirot. "I heard that conversation myself." "And is that the last that is known of Ratchett?" "Yes." Poirot turned to the doctor, and the latter continued. "The window in Mr. Ratchett's compartment was wide open, obviously to give us the impression that the murderer had escaped through it. I think the window was open as a blind. If the murderer had escaped through the window, there would be tracks in the snow, and there are none." "When was the body discovered?" Poirot asked. "Michel," the conductor started. The frightened expression had not left his pale face. "Tell this gentleman exactly what happened." Monsieur Book, Messiah Book, commanded. "Mr. Ratchett's valet knocked on his door this morning." The conductor began shakily. Several times. There was no answer. Then, an hour ago, a waiter came from the restaurant car to see if Monsieur would be having breakfast. You see, it was already 11 o'clock. I opened the door with my passkey, but the door would not open. It turned out to be fastened by the chain as well. No one answered, and there was a draft of cold air coming from inside. The window was wide open, and snow was drifting in. I thought the passenger had suffered a stroke. I fetched the train master. We broke the chain and entered the compartment. He was already, c'était terrible, c'était terrible. And he covered his face with his hands once more. So the door was locked from inside by both the key and the chain. Poirot mused. Could it not be suicide? The Greek doctor smiled sardonically. Have you ever seen a suicide inflict no less than a dozen stab wounds upon himself? He asked. Poirot's eyebrows rose in astonishment. What a monstrous piece of savagery! He exclaimed. It is a woman. The train master spoke for the first time. Mark my words, it is a woman. Only a woman is capable of such a thing. Dr. Constantine wrinkled his forehead in thought. It would have to be a very strong woman, he said. I do not wish to use technical terms. They only confuse the matter. But one or two of the blows, after cutting to the muscle, went right through the bone. For that, I assure you, great strength is required. Then the crime was not committed by a professional? Poirot asked. Not at all. Dr. Constantine confirmed. The blows seem to have been struck haphazardly and at random. Some are mere glancing cuts that did little harm. It gives the impression that the murderer, with eyes closed, struck out in a blind, savage fury. C'est une femme, c'est une femme, said the train master. They're all like that. Malice gives them strength. He nodded so meaningfully that everyone suspected he was drawing from personal experience. I might perhaps add something to the information you've gathered, said Poirot. Mr. Ratchett spoke to me yesterday. As I understood it, he suspected that his life was in danger, so he was bumped off. Isn't that what the Americans say? Asked Monsieur Book. In that case, it wasn't a woman, but a gangster or a bandit. The train master looked offended that his version had been dismissed. Even if the murderer is a gangster, Poirot said, I must say that he is by no means a professional. There was a note of specialist disapproval in Poirot's voice. There is one American traveling in this car, Monsieur Book reported, sticking to his line of thought. A tall man, quite vulgar and dressed in dreadfully poor taste. He chews gum and clearly has no idea how to behave in polite society. Do you know whom I mean? The conductor, for Monsieur Book was addressing him, nodded. Yes, monsieur, but it could not have been him. If he had entered or left the compartment, I would certainly have seen him. Who knows? Who knows? But we shall come back to that. The main thing now is to decide what to do next. And he looked at Poirot. Poirot, in turn, looked at Monsieur Book. Oh, please, my friend, said Monsieur Book. You know what I am going to ask of you. I know you are all-powerful. Take the investigation upon yourself. No, no. For heaven's sake, do not refuse. You see, for us, I am speaking of the International Sleeping Car Company. This is very important. How much simpler everything would be if, by the time the Yugoslavian police finally arrive, we had a ready-made solution. Otherwise, we face delays, formalities, in short, 1,000 inconveniences. And who knows, perhaps even serious trouble for innocent people. But if you solve the mystery, none of that will happen. We shall say, a murder has occurred. Here is the criminal. And if I fail to solve the mystery, my friend, Monsieur Book said smoothly, I know your reputation. I know your methods. This case is made for you. To study the past of these people, to check if they are lying, would take a great deal of time and energy. But how many times have I heard you say, to solve a mystery, I only need to sit back and think. Please do exactly that. question the passengers, examine the body, look at the evidence, and then, in short, I believe in you. I am convinced this is no empty boast on your part. So, please sit back, think, employ, as you often say, the little gray cells, and you will know everything. And he looked at his friend with affection. Your faith touches me, Poirot said with emotion. You say this case is not difficult. I myself last night, but we need not mention that yet. To tell you the truth, the case has interested me. Only half an hour ago, I thought we should be dreadfully bored in these snowdrifts. And suddenly, out of nowhere, a ready-made mystery. Then you accept my offer? Monsieur Book asked impatiently. C'est entendu, c'est entendu. I take the case. Excellent. We are all at your service. To begin with, I shall need a plan of the Istanbul to Calais coach, showing which passengers occupied which compartments, and I also wish to see the passengers' passports and tickets. Michel will bring everything to you. The conductor left the car. Who else is traveling on our train? Poirot asked. In this car, only Dr. Constantine and I. In the Bucharest coach, one lame old man. The conductor has known him for a long time. There are ordinary coaches as well, but they need not be taken into account because they were locked immediately after dinner. Ahead of the Istanbul to Calais coach, there's only the restaurant car. In that case, said Poirot, it seems we must look for the murder within the Istanbul to Calais coach itself. He turned to the doctor. That is what you were hinting at, were you not? The Greek doctor nodded. At 12:30 in the morning, the snow began and the train stopped. Since then, no one could have left it. And if that is so, Monsieur Book concluded, the murderer is still on the train. He is among us. Chapter 6. A woman? To begin with, said Poirot, I should like to speak with Mr. McQueen. It is possible that he may be able to give us valuable information. Certainly, replied Monsieur Book. He turned to the train conductor. Ask Mr. McQueen to come here. The conductor went out. A few moments later, the attendant Pierre Michel returned with a bundle of passports and tickets and handed them to Monsieur Book. Thank you, Michel. And now, I think it would be best for you to return to your car. We will take your formal statement later. Very well, monsieur. Michel left the room. After we had spoken with McQueen, Poirot said, I hope the doctor will not mind coming with me to the dead man's compartment? Certainly not. And when we have finished our inspection, he was interrupted as the conductor brought in Hector McQueen. Monsieur Book rose. We are a little cramped for space here, he said pleasantly. Take my seat, Mr. McQueen. Monsieur Poirot will sit opposite you, just like that. He turned back to the conductor. Clear the restaurant car. It will be needed by Monsieur Poirot. You would prefer to interview the passengers there, would you not, my friend? Yes, that would be most convenient. Poirot agreed. McQueen looked from one to the other, unable to follow the rapid French conversation. Quasi quil y a, chuesi chuioy a, he began, carefully pronouncing the words. Pourquoi? Pourquoi, with an authoritative gesture. Poirot indicated the seat in the corner. McQueen sat down and repeated once more, Pourquoi. But then, breaking off, he switched to his native tongue. What's going on? Has something happened? He looked around at everyone present. Poirot nodded. You are right. Prepare yourself. I have unpleasant news for you. Your employer, Mr. Ratchett, is dead. McQueen gave a low whistle. His eyes brightened, but he showed neither surprise nor grief. So they got him after all? What exactly do you mean by that, Mr. McQueen? McQueen hesitated. You assume that Mr. Ratchett was murdered? Poirot asked. Wasn't he? This time McQueen did show genuine surprise. Well, yes, he said after a brief pause. That was the first thing that came into my mind. You don't mean he died in his sleep? The old man was as healthy as... He stopped, unable to find a comparison. No, said Poirot. Your assumption was quite correct. Mr. Ratchett was murdered, stabbed, but I should like to know why you were so sure he was murdered and did not simply die. McQueen wavered. "Before I go any further," he said at last, "I must know who you are and what you have to do with this business." "I am a representative of the International Sleeping Car Company," Poirot said, and after a significant pause, he added, "I am a detective. My name is Poirot." It did not produce the expected impression. McQueen merely said, "Oh, really?" and waited for what would follow. "The name is perhaps familiar to you?" It sounded a bit familiar, though I always thought it was the name of a dressmaker. Poirot gave him a look of pure indignation. "Simply incredible!" he exclaimed. "What is incredible?" "Nothing. It is of no importance. Let us not wander from the point. I would like you to tell me, Mr. McQueen, everything you know about Mr. Ratchett. You are not a relative of his." "No, I am his secretary, or rather, I was his secretary." "How long have you held that position?" "Just over a year." "Tell me more about that." "I met Mr. Ratchett just over a year ago in Persia." "What were you doing there?" Poirot interrupted. "I had come from New York to look into an oil concession on the spot. I don't suppose that would interest you. My friends and I lost a good deal of money on it. Mr. Ratchett was staying at the same hotel. He had just had a disagreement with his secretary and offered me the job. I accepted. I was broke at the time and was glad of the chance to get a well-paid job without much effort." "And what have you been doing since then?" "Traveling. Mr. Ratchett wanted to see the world, but his lack of languages was a drawback. He used me more as a guide and interpreter than as a secretary. My duties were not very heavy. Now, tell me all you know about your employer." The young man shrugged. A look of uncertainty crossed his face. "That's not so easy. What was his full name?" "Samuel Edward Ratchett." "Was he an American citizen?" "Yes." "Which state did he come from?" "I don't know." "Well, tell me what you do know." "To tell you the truth, Mr. Poirot, I know absolutely nothing. Mr. Ratchett never spoke of himself or of his life back in America." "And why do you think that was?" "I don't know. I thought perhaps he was ashamed of his origins. Some people are." "Did that explanation seem plausible to you?" "To be perfectly honest, no." "Had he any relatives?" "He never mentioned any." Poirot persisted. "Still, Mr. McQueen, you must have had some theory of your own." "Truthfully, I did. For one thing, I don't believe Ratchett was his real name. I think he was running away from someone or something, and that's why he left America. But until quite recently, he seemed to feel safe. And then he began to receive letters, threatening letters. Did you see them?" "Yes. It was part of my duty to attend to his correspondence. The first of these letters arrived 2 weeks ago." "Have these letters been destroyed?" "No. I believe I have a couple of them still in my files, and one, as far as I know, Mr. Ratchett tore to pieces in a rage. Shall I get them for you?" "If you would be so kind." McQueen left the room. A few minutes later, he returned and placed 2 rather grimy sheets of stationery before Poirot. The first letter read, "Thought you could double-cross us and get away with it, did you? Not a chance, Ratchett. We'll get you yet." There was no signature. Poirot raised his eyebrows and, without a word, took up the second letter. "Ratchett, we're going to finish you off soon. Remember, there's no escape." Poirot set the letter aside. "The style is somewhat monotonous," said Poirot, "but one cannot say the same for the handwriting." McQueen stared at him. "You would not have noticed it," Poirot said blandly. "It requires an experienced eye. This letter, Mr. McQueen, was not written by one person, but by 2, if not more. Each wrote a single letter of a word. Furthermore, it was written in printed capitals to make identification more difficult." After a short silence, he added, "Were you aware that Mr. Ratchett had applied to me for help?" "To you?" McQueen's astonishment was so patently genuine that Poirot believed the young man. "Precisely." Poirot nodded. "Ratchett was very much alarmed. Tell me, how did he behave when he received the first letter?" McQueen did not answer at once. "It's hard to say. He seemed to laugh it off. At any rate, it didn't seem to rattle him. And yet, McQueen shrugged. I felt that deep down he was uneasy. Poirot nodded again. "Mr. McQueen," he asked suddenly, "can you tell me quite frankly how you felt about your employer? Did you like him?" Hector McQueen hesitated. "No," he said at last, "I did not. Why, I can't exactly say. He was always perfectly pleasant." The secretary paused and added, "To be honest, Monsieur, Poirot, I didn't like him, and I didn't trust him. I am convinced he was a cruel and dangerous man, though I must admit I have nothing to back up that opinion." "Thank you, Mr. McQueen. One more question. When did you last see Mr. Ratchett alive?" "Last night, he thought for a moment, I should say about 10 o'clock. I went to his compartment to take down some instructions." "Regarding what?" "Regarding some antique tiles and pottery he had bought in Persia. They had sent him the wrong ones. We had been engaged in a long and rather tiresome correspondence about them." "And that was the last time you saw Mr. Ratchett alive?" "I believe so, yes." "And do you know when Mr. Ratchett received the last of those threatening letters?" "On the morning of the day we left Constantinople." "I must ask you one more question, Mr. McQueen. Were you on good terms with your employer?" A mischievous spark flickered in the young man's eyes. "That question ought to make me feel quite nervous. But as they say in our detective novels, you got nothing on me. I was on excellent terms with Ratchett. Would you mind giving me your full name and your address in America?" The secretary dictated his full name, Hector Willem McQueen, and his New York address. Poirot leaned back against the cushions. "That will be all for now, Mr. McQueen," he said. "I should be very much obliged if you would keep the news of Mr. Ratchett's death a secret for a little while. His valet Masterman will be bound to know." "He probably knows already," Poirot said with a touch of annoyance. "But if so, see to it that he holds his tongue. That shouldn't be difficult. He's British and, in his own words, doesn't mix with everyone. He has a low opinion of Americans and a lower one of all other nationalities." "Thank you, Mr. McQueen. The American left. Well," asked Monsieur Book, "do you believe what that young man told you? He seemed to me to be speaking frankly and honestly. Had he been involved in the murder, he would surely have pretended to be fond of his employer. It is true that Mr. Ratchett did not tell him he had tried to secure my services, but that does not strike me as suspicious. It seems the deceased was of a secretive nature. So you consider one person free of suspicion?" Monsieur Book said cheerfully. Poirot gave him a reproachful look. No, I suspect everyone until the last moment," he said. "And yet, I must admit, I simply cannot imagine McQueen, who is the soul of sobriety and caution, suddenly losing his head so completely as to strike his victim no less than a dozen times. It does not fit his character. It does not fit at all." "True," Monsieur Book reflected. "That is the act of a man in a fit of rage, almost a frenzy, which suggests a Latin temperament, or, as our friend conductor insists, a woman." Chapter 7. The Body, accompanied by Dr. Constantine. Poirot passed into the next carriage and approached the compartment where the murdered man lay. The conductor arrived promptly and opened the door with his passkey. As they stepped inside, Poirot turned a questioning look toward his companion. "Has anything in the compartment been moved?" "No, nothing has been touched. I was careful not to disturb the body during my initial examination." With a nod, Poirot let his eyes roam over the room. His first observation was how freezing the compartment had become. The window was wide open, and the blind was drawn up. Poirot shivered. The doctor gave a self-satisfied smile. "I decided to leave the window open," he said. Poirot examined the window closely. "You did the right thing," he announced. "No one could have left the train through this window. It is quite likely it was opened specifically to lead us to that conclusion. But if so, the snow has foiled the murderer's plans." Poirot carefully inspected the frame. Producing a small box from his pocket, he dusted the surface with powder. "No fingerprints," he said. The frame has been wiped clean. However, even if there were prints, they would tell us little. They would likely belong only to Ratchett, his valet, or the conductor. Criminals nowadays do not make such mistakes. And since that is the case, he continued briskly, we may as well close the window. It is like an icebox in here. Having dealt with the window, he turned his attention for the first time to the body sprawled on the bunk. Ratchett lay on his back. His pajama jacket, stained with rusty patches of blood, was open at the chest. You understand, I had to determine the nature of the wounds, the doctor explained. Poirot leaned over the body. When he straightened up, his face was contorted with distaste. A most unpleasant sight, he remarked. The murderer must have stood right here, raining blow after blow upon him. How many wounds did you count? 12. 1 or 2 are quite shallow, mere scratches. But 3 of them, on the other hand, are fatal. Something in the doctor's tone caught Poirot's attention. He peered at the short Greek man, whose brow was furrowed in bewilderment as he stared at the corpse. You are puzzled by something, are you not? Poirot asked softly. Confess, my friend, something has baffled you? You are right, the doctor admitted. And what is it? Look at these 2 wounds, the doctor said, pointing. Here and here. The knife went deep, many blood vessels were severed. And yet the edges of the wounds have not gaped. From such injuries, the blood should have gushed out. And what does that imply? That when Ratchett received these wounds, he had already been dead for some time. But that is absurd. At first glance, yes, Poirot said thoughtfully, though, of course, a murderer might suddenly decide he hadn't finished a job and return completed. But that is indeed quite ridiculous. What else surprises you? Just one other circumstance. And that is, look at this wound here, near the right shoulder, almost under the armpit. Take my pencil. Could you deliver such a blow? Poirot raised his hand. I see your point. It would be very difficult, almost impossible, to strike like that with the right hand. Holding a knife that way would be most awkward. But if the knife were in the left hand... Exactly, Monsieur Poirot. That wound was almost certainly inflicted by a left-handed person. So, you are suggesting the murderer is left-handed? No, I fear it is not that simple. Do you agree? I agree entirely, Monsieur Poirot, because the other wounds were clearly made with the right hand. So, 2 murderers. We return to that again, the detective murmured. Was the light on? He asked suddenly. It is hard to say. You see, every morning around 10 o'clock, the conductor switches off the lights of the entire carriage. We shall find out from the switches, said Poirot. He examined the switch for the ceiling light, and the reading lamp by the bed. The first was off. The second was on. Well now, he said musingly, let us consider this version. Enter the first and second murderers. As the great Shakespeare would put it, the first murderer stabs a victim and, turning off the light, leaves the compartment. The second murderer enters, does not realize in the dark that the deed is done, and inflicts at least 2 more wounds on the dead man. What do you say to that? Magnificent! Cried the little doctor, quite beside himself with delight. Poirot's eyes twinkled mockingly. You think so? I am glad, because to me, such a theory seems to contradict all common sense. But how else can it be explained? That is the very question I am asking myself. Is this a mere coincidence of circumstances, or not? And are there other inconsistencies suggesting that 2 people were involved? I believe the answer is yes, the doctor replied. Some wounds, as I mentioned, show a lack of physical strength, or perhaps a lack of resolve. They are feeble blows that barely broke the skin. But this wound and this one, he pointed again, those required great force. The knife cut right through the muscle. So, in your opinion, such wounds could only have been dealt by a man? Most likely. And a woman? A young, healthy woman, an athlete, perhaps, could deliver such blows, especially in a fit of rage. In my view, it is highly improbable. Poirot remained silent for 2 minutes. Do you follow me? The doctor asked impatiently. Indeed, The case is becoming clearer by the second. The murderer is a man of immense physical strength, who is also a weakling. He is a woman, and he is both left-handed and right-handed at the same time. It is simply ridiculous. Then, with a sudden flash of anger, he continued, "And the victim, how does he behave? Does he scream? Does he resist? Does he defend himself?" Poirot reached under the pillow and pulled out the automatic pistol that Ratchett had shown him the day before. "As you see, the magazine is full," he said. They looked around the compartment. Ratchett's clothes hung on the hooks. On the small table, formed by the fold-down lid of the wash basin, stood a glass of water containing a set of false teeth, an empty glass, a bottle of mineral water, a large flask, and an ashtray with a cigar butt. There were also some charred scraps of paper and 2 burnt matches. The doctor sniffed the empty glass. "That is why Ratchett did not resist," he said in a low voice. "He was drugged." "Yes." Poirot nodded. He picked up the matches and examined them closely. "So, you found a clue after all?" the little doctor asked eagerly. "These matches are different shapes," Poirot explained. "One of them is flatter. Do you see? Those flat matches are sold in cardboard books right here on the train," the doctor noted. Poirot searched Ratchett's pockets and pulled out a box of matches. Once again, he carefully compared 2 matches. "The thick match was struck by Mr. Ratchett," he said. "Now we must see if he happened to have any flat matches as well." But further searching yielded no results. Poirot's eyes roamed the compartment. It seemed nothing could escape his piercing gaze. Suddenly, he gave a sharp cry, stooped down, and picked up a scrap of finest cambric from the floor. In the corner, the letter H was embroidered. "A woman's handkerchief," said the doctor. "Our friend, the train conductor, was right. A woman is involved. And for our convenience, she left her handkerchief right here," said Poirot. "Exactly like in detective novels and films. And to make our task even easier, she even embroidered her initials on it." "Rare luck indeed," the doctor rejoiced. "Is that so?" Poirot asked, in a tone that made the doctor grow wary. But before the doctor could ask a question, Poirot quickly stooped again and picked up something else. This time, a pipe cleaner lay in his palm. "Surely that must be Mr. Ratchett's pipe cleaner," the doctor suggested. "Mr. Ratchett's pockets contain no pipe, no tobacco, and no pouch. In that case, it is a clue." "Indeed. And once again, one planted for our convenience. And notice, this time the clue points to a man. Yes, we have clues in abundance. By the way, what have you done with the weapon?" "We found no weapon. The murderer must have taken it with him. I wonder why." Poirot mused. "Ha!" the doctor suddenly cried out, as he cautiously searched the pajama pockets of the dead man. "I completely overlooked this. I opened the jacket immediately and forgot to check the pockets." He pulled a gold watch from the breast pocket. Its case was badly dented. The hands pointed to 1:15. "Do you see?" Dr. Constantine cried impatiently. "Now we know the time of the murder. My calculations are confirmed. I told you, between 12 and 2, most likely around 1 o'clock, though it is hard to be precise in such matters. And here is your proof. The watch shows 1:15. Therefore, the crime was committed at that time. It is not impossible that it was so. Not impossible." The doctor looked at Poirot in surprise. "Forgive me, Monsieur Poirot, but I do not quite understand you." "I do not quite understand myself," said Poirot. "I understand nothing at all, and as you may have noticed, that troubles me." With a deep sigh, he bent over the table, examining the charred scraps of paper. "What I need most urgently right now," he muttered to himself, "is an old-fashioned hat box." Dr. Constantine was utterly bewildered, not knowing what to make of such a peculiar request. But Poirot gave him no time for questions. Opening the door, he called the conductor from the corridor. The conductor appeared instantly. "How many women are in this carriage?" The conductor counted on his fingers. 1, 2, 3, 6, monsieur. An elderly American lady, a Swedish lady, a young English lady, Countess Andrenii, Princess Dragomirov, and her maid. Poirot thought for a moment. They all have hat boxes, do they not? Yes, monsieur. Then bring me. Let me think. Yes, that is it. Bring me the Swedish lady's hat box and the maid's hat box. All my hopes rest upon them. Tell them they are needed for a customs inspection, or some such thing. Anything you like. Do not worry, monsieur. It will be handled perfectly. Neither lady is in her compartment at the moment. Then hurry. The conductor left, and soon returned with 2 hat boxes. Opening the maid's box, Poirot cast aside immediately and took up the Swedish lady's. Peering inside, he gave a joyful cry and carefully removed the hats. Underneath were wire mesh frames. This is exactly what I needed. These hat boxes were made 5 years ago. The hat was fastened to the wire mesh with a pin. Poirot deftly detached both mesh frames, put the hats back, and told the conductor to return the boxes. When the door closed behind him, he turned to the doctor. You see, my dear doctor, I myself do not rely too much on expert forensics. I am usually interested in psychology, not fingerprints or cigarette ash. However, in this case, we must call upon science. This compartment is full of clues, but how can we be sure they are not fakes? I do not quite follow you, Monsieur Poirot. Well, let me give you an example. We find a woman's handkerchief. Who lost it? A woman? Or perhaps a man, having committed the crime, decided, let them think this is a woman's work. I shall inflict far more wounds than necessary, making it seem as though some were dealt by a weak and frail person, and then I shall drop a woman's handkerchief in a conspicuous place. That is one possibility. But there is another. Suppose the murderer is a woman. She then deliberately drops a pipe cleaner. So we might think a man committed the crime. Can we seriously believe that 2 people, a man and a woman, independently committed the same crime, and that each was so careless as to leave us a clue? Isn't that a few too many coincidences? And what does the hat box have to do with this? The doctor asked, still mystified. I shall tell you. As I said, all these clues, the watch stopped at 1:15, the handkerchief, the pipe cleaner, could be either genuine or planted. I cannot determine that yet. But there is one clue which I believe is genuine, though I might be wrong even there. I am talking about the flat match. Doctor, I am certain it was struck not by Mr. Ratchett, but by the murderer, struck to destroy a compromising paper. Consequently, that paper held a link, a key to the mystery, and I shall attempt to reconstruct that note and discover what that link was. He left the compartment and returned a few seconds later with a small spirit lamp and a pair of curling tongs. These are for my mustache, Poirot explained, brandishing the tongs. The doctor watched him with wide eyes. Poirot flattened the wire mesh frames, carefully placed a charred scrap of paper on one of them, laid the other on top, and, holding the 2 frames together with the tongs, held the contraption over the flame of the spirit lamp. A makeshift arrangement, to be sure, he tossed over his shoulder, but let's hope it serves our purpose. The doctor watched Poirot's movements with rapt attention. The wire mesh grew red-hot, and on the paper, faint outlines of letters began to emerge. Slowly, the letters formed words written in fire. The scrap was tiny, containing only 3 words and a fragment of 4th. Member little Daisy Armstrong. So that is it. Poirot cried out. Does that mean something to you? Asked the doctor. Poirot's eyes gleamed. He carefully set down the tongs. Yes, he said. Now I know the real name of the murdered man. And I know why he had to flee from America. What is his name? Cassetti. Cassetti? Constantine wrinkled his brow. That name reminds me of something. An event from several years ago. No, I cannot quite recall it. Some sensational case in America, was it not? Yes, said Poirot. You are not mistaken. It happened in America. It was clear he was not inclined to dwell on the subject. Glancing around the compartment, he added, We shall attend to that in due time. For now, let's ensure we have examined everything possible. Once more, he quickly and deftly searched the dead man's pockets, but found nothing of further interest. He tried to open the door leading to the adjoining compartment, but it was bolted from the other side. "There is one thing I do not understand," said Dr. Constantine. "The murderer could not have left through the window. The communicating door was locked from the other side, and the door to the corridor was locked from the inside with both the key and the chain. How, then, did he manage to escape?" "That is exactly how the audience reasons at the circus," Poirot explained. "When an illusionist thrusts a man bound hand and foot into a locked box and he disappears." "You mean to say—" "I mean to say," Poirot continued, "that if the murderer wanted to convince us he had escaped through the window, he naturally had to prove to us that he could have left in no other way. It is a trick, much like the disappearance from a locked box. Our task is to discover how the trick was performed." Poirot slid the bolt on the door leading to the next compartment. "Just in case," he explained. "The venerable Mrs. Hubbard takes it into her head to inspect the scene of the crime, so she may describe it later to her daughter." He looked around once more. "I believe there is nothing more for us to do here. Let us return to Monsieur Book." Chapter 8. The Kidnapping of Daisy Armstrong. When they entered Monsieur Book's compartment, he was finishing an omelet. "I gave orders for lunch to be served at once," he said, "and then to have the dining car cleared as quickly as possible, so that Monsieur Poirot may begin his interrogation of the witnesses. I have arranged for the three of us to have our meal here." "An excellent idea," Poirot replied, clearly pleased. None of them were particularly hungry, so the meal took very little time. However, Monsieur Book waited until they had moved on to coffee before speaking about the matter that was on everyone's mind. "Well," he asked, "well, I have succeeded in establishing the identity of the victim. I know why he had to flee from America." "Who is he?" "Do you remember how much the newspapers once wrote about the Armstrong child? Well, Ratchett is Cassetti, the very same man, the murderer of Daisy Armstrong. Now I remember. A terrible tragedy, although I only recall it in the broadest terms. Colonel Armstrong was an Englishman, a recipient of the Victoria Cross, but his mother was American, the daughter of Wallace Clarence Vanderholt, the famous Wall Street millionaire. Armstrong married the daughter of Linda Arden, the most celebrated tragic actress of her time in America. The Armstrongs lived in America with their only child, a little girl whom they adored. When the girl was 3 years old, she was kidnapped, and an unthinkable ransom was demanded for her return. I will not weary you with all the details of the case. I shall skip to the moment when the parents, having paid a ransom of $200,000, found the child's body. It turned out the girl had been dead for at least 2 weeks. It is difficult to describe the universal outrage, but that was not the end. Mrs. Armstrong was expecting another child at the time. From the shock, she gave birth prematurely to a stillborn baby and died. Her husband, broken-hearted, shot himself. My God, what a tragedy. Now I remember it all, said Monsieur Book. But as far as I know, someone else died as well? Yes, an unfortunate nursemaid, French or Swiss by birth. The police were convinced she was involved in the crime. The girl wept and denied everything, but they did not believe her, and in a fit of despair, she threw herself out of a window and fell to her death. Later, it was proven that she had absolutely no connection to crime. It is frightening even to think about, Monsieur Book said with horror. About 6 months later, Cassetti, the leader of the gang that kidnapped the child, was arrested. This gang had used such methods before. If they suspected the police were on their trail, they would kill the prisoner, hide the body, and continue to extort money from the relatives until the crime was uncovered. I tell you plainly, my friend, Cassetti killed the girl. There is no doubt about that. However, thanks to the enormous wealth he had accumulated and his secret power over various people, he managed to get himself acquitted on a technicality. The mob would have lynched him regardless, but he realized this and escaped in time. Now, Everything else has become clear to me. He changed his name, left America, and has since lived a life of leisure, traveling and living off his fortune. What a monster, Monsieur Book said with loathing. I do not regret in the least that he was killed. I share your sentiments. And yet, there was no need to kill him on the Orient Express, as if there were no other places. A smile touched Poirot's lips. He understood that Monsieur Book was judging somewhat partially. The main thing for us now, Poirot explained, is to find out who killed Cassetti, whether it was a rival gang that had its own score to settle with him, or whether it was a personal vendetta. He then described what he had managed to read on the charred scrap of paper. If my assumption is correct, it means the murderer burned the letter. Why? Because it mentioned the name Armstrong, which provides a key to the mystery. And are any of the Armstrongs still alive? Alas, I do not know. I believe I once read somewhere about a younger sister of Mrs. Armstrong. Poirot continued to lay out the conclusions he and the doctor had reached. At the mention of the broken watch, Monsieur Book became visibly animated. Now we know exactly when the crime was committed. Yes, just think, how convenient, Poirot said, and something in his voice made both of his companions look at him with curiosity. You say you heard Ratchett yourself, talking to conductor at 20 minutes to 1? Poirot recounted how it happened. Well, said Monsieur Book, in any case, it proves that at 20 minutes to 1, Cassetti or Ratchett, as I shall continue to call him, was still alive. To be perfectly precise, it was 23 minutes to 1. So, in official terms, at 12:37, Mr. Ratchett was still alive. At least we have one solid fact. Poirot did not answer. He sat, staring thoughtfully ahead. There was a knock at the door, and a waiter entered the compartment. The restaurant is free now, monsieur, he said. We shall move there. Monsieur Book rose to his feet. May I come with you? Constantine asked. But of course, my dear doctor, unless, that is, Monsieur Poirot objects. Not at all, not at all. After a brief exchange of pleasantries. After you, monsieur. No, after you. They stepped out into the corridor.